Have you ever stopped and asked yourself this? How can something as simple as the bread you eat every single day quietly decide whether your kidneys stay stable or slowly move closer to failure? Most people never question it. Bread feels harmless, familiar, comforting. But what if I told you that for millions of Americans, especially after 50, the wrong type of bread is silently overloading their kidneys with sodium, phosphorus, and hidden additives day after day, without causing pain, without obvious symptoms, until suddenly their lab numbers worsen and no one understands why? I'm Dr. Mark Ellis, and I've seen this pattern far too often. Patients come to me confused, frustrated, even scared, saying, "Doctor, I did everything right. So why are my kidneys still getting worse?" And when we trace it back, the problem isn't always what they added to their diet, but what they never thought to question. Because kidney damage doesn't usually happen with a loud warning. It happens quietly through everyday habits that seem safe, like the bread on your plate. But here's the part most people never hear, and this is critical. Not all bread harms your kidneys. In fact, certain types can actually support digestion, reduce toxin buildup in your bloodstream, and ease the workload on your kidneys if you know exactly what to look for. And by the end of this video, you will. I'm going to walk you through the 5 best breads for kidney health using clear science, real-world insight, and practical guidance you can use the very next time you're standing in the grocery aisle. And stay with me, because the final bread on this list is one most Americans eat almost every day, but when chosen correctly, it can quietly make a powerful difference in protecting your kidneys long-term. Whole grain and whole wheat bread are often the first foods people with kidney concerns are told to avoid, and that advice sounds logical until you look closer. I've met countless patients who cut bread completely, thinking they were protecting their kidneys, only to struggle with digestion, blood sugar swings, and constant fatigue. One patient, a 62-year-old man I'll call Robert, told me he gave up bread overnight. "I thought less food meant less work for my kidneys," he said. But a few months later, his labs didn't improve, and his energy was worse. What he didn't realize was that the right bread, not no bread, can actually help the kidneys do less work, not more. Here's why whole grain or 100% whole wheat bread deserves a second look. Unlike refined white bread, whole grains keep all 3 parts of the grain, the bran, germ, and endosperm. That matters because the bran is packed with fiber, and fiber plays a quiet but powerful role in kidney health. When digestion slows and waste sits in the gut, more toxins get reabsorbed into the bloodstream. That means your kidneys have to filter more day after day. Fiber helps move waste out faster, reducing the toxic load your kidneys are forced to handle. Large population studies have shown that higher fiber intake is linked to better toxin control and improved gut health, both of which are directly connected to kidney function. In people with early kidney disease, even modest increases in daily fiber have been associated with lower levels of uremic toxins, the waste products that stress kidney filters. And there's another layer most people overlook: fiber helps stabilize blood sugar. For anyone with diabetes or insulin resistance, that's critical, because repeated blood sugar spikes are one of the fastest ways kidney damage quietly progresses. Now, this is where many people get confused in the bread aisle. Whole wheat and whole grain are not marketing buzzwords, they're meaningful labels when used correctly. Whole wheat comes entirely from wheat, while whole grain can include oats, rye, barley, or corn. Both can be kidney-friendly, but only if they're truly whole. If the ingredient list starts with enriched flour or white flour, most of the fiber and protective compounds have already been stripped away. That's where the problem begins. When chosen correctly, whole grain bread becomes less of a burden and more of a support. 1 to 2 slices a day can provide several grams of fiber, enough to noticeably improve digestion without overloading the kidneys with protein or minerals. The key is pairing it wisely with low-sodium foods like eggs, vegetables, or simple spreads, instead of salty meats or processed cheese that cancel out the benefits. But here's the part that surprises people. Whole grain bread isn't just about fiber, it's about timing and tolerance. Some people do beautifully with it, while others notice bloating or discomfort. And when digestion struggles, kidney stress quietly follows. That's why understanding your own response matters more than blindly following old rules. And this leads us to an important question. What if your body can't handle traditional wheat at all, no matter how whole it is? Because for many people, the next category of bread changes everything. but only if you know how to choose it correctly. For people who tried whole grain bread and still felt bloated, heavy, or uncomfortable, the problem often isn't willpower, it's digestion. And when digestion struggles, the kidneys quietly pay the price. This is where gluten-free bread enters the conversation, not as a trend, but as a potential turning point for kidney stress that many people never connect. I've spoken with patients who said I switched to whole wheat like everyone told me, but my stomach never settled. And that lingering discomfort wasn't just annoying, it was a sign that waste was lingering longer in the gut, giving toxins more time to slip back into the bloodstream. Nutrition research has consistently shown that improved gut transit time and reduced digestive inflammation are linked to lower circulating uremic toxins, the very substances that accelerate kidney decline. Gluten-free breads, when chosen carefully, can help ease this burden. Many are made from naturally gluten-free grains like rice, corn, quinoa, buckwheat, or amaranth, which tend to be gentler on digestion. When digestion improves, fewer toxins linger and kidney workload subtly decreases. That's the upside most people never hear about. But this is where things get dangerous if you're not paying attention. Gluten-free does not automatically mean kidney-friendly. To improve texture and flavor, many gluten-free breads are loaded with sodium-added phosphorus or potassium-based additives. For someone with kidney disease, these hidden minerals can quietly push blood pressure higher, increase fluid retention, and slow kidney recovery, even while digestion feels better. This is why label reading matters more here than anywhere else. Safer gluten-free options tend to have short ingredient lists and lower sodium without phosphate additives or potassium salts. One slice at a time is usually enough. Overeating even healthy gluten-free bread can slowly reintroduce the same problems you were trying to escape. Pairing it with fresh foods like vegetables, eggs, or lean protein keeps the balance in your favor. There's also an emotional side to this choice that shouldn't be ignored. For many people, gluten-free bread is the first time they realize food doesn't have to hurt to be nourishing. That relief alone helps people stick with better eating habits long-term, which is critical for kidney stability. Consistency, not perfection, is what protects kidneys over years, not weeks. But digestion isn't the only hidden factor that determines how much stress bread places on your kidneys. There's another category of bread that goes a step further, one that actually changes the grain itself before it ever reaches your plate. And just knowing about gluten-free options still isn't enough, because this next factor may matter even more than gluten itself. If gluten-free bread helps digestion by removing a problem ingredient, sprouted grain, bread goes one step deeper. It changes the grain itself before it ever reaches your body. And this distinction matters far more than most people realize, especially when kidneys are already under strain. I often explain it this way: some foods ask your body to work harder, while others quietly do part of the work for you. Sprouted grains fall into the second category, and for kidney health, that difference can be profound. I remember a patient in his early 60s who told me, "I eat healthy bread, but I still feel heavy afterward." He wasn't wrong. His bread was whole, grain low sugar, and looked perfect on paper. But digestion was still slow, and his labs showed mild but steady increases in waste markers. When he switched to sprouted grain bread, not more food, just a different kind, his digestion noticeably improved within weeks. More importantly, his kidney numbers stopped drifting upward. Nothing dramatic, just quiet stabilization. And with kidney health, that kind of quiet improvement is everything. Here's what's happening behind the scenes. Sprouted grain bread is made from whole grains that have been soaked just long enough to begin sprouting. That single step activates natural enzymes inside the grain. These enzymes break down complex starches and reduce compounds called phytates, often referred to as anti-nutrients. Phytates bind to minerals like iron, calcium, and zinc, making them harder for your body to absorb. For people with kidney disease who already struggle with nutrient balance, this matters more than most dietary advice ever mentions. Scientific research has shown that sprouting grains can significantly lower phytate levels while increasing antioxidant activity. This means minerals are absorbed more efficiently and inflammatory stress on the body is reduced. In practical terms, that translates to better energy, less digestive strain, and fewer waste byproducts circulating in the blood, exactly what vulnerable kidneys need. Sprouted grain bread also tends to contain more usable protein and fiber per slice, compared to standard bread, helping move waste through the gut instead of letting it linger. Fiber again plays a central role here. By speeding up intestinal transit time, fiber reduces the reabsorption of your toxins. Those same toxins kidneys must filter when digestion slows. Studies in nutrition science consistently link improved gut function with lower toxin burden in people with compromised kidney function. This is why sprouted grains often feel lighter after eating, even though they're nutritionally dense. Of course, this doesn't mean unlimited portions are safe. Even the healthiest bread can become a problem when eaten mindlessly. For most people managing kidney health, 1 slice per meal, 1 to 2 slices per day is a smart boundary. The goal isn't abundance, it's efficiency. Pair sprouted grain bread with low-sodium foods, fresh vegetables, or simple proteins, and it becomes part of a system that supports the kidneys instead of stressing them. What makes sprouted grain bread especially valuable is that it works quietly. There's no dramatic sensation, no instant detox feeling. Instead, it reduces friction inside the body, less inflammation, better absorption, smoother digestion. And kidneys thrive when friction is low. But here's where many people stop short. They assume that easier digestion automatically means fewer long-term risks, and that assumption can be dangerous. Because there's another type of bread that changes digestion in a completely different way, through bacteria and fermentation, and for some people that difference can determine whether kidney stress eases or silently accelerates. After sprouted grain bread, many people assume they've reached the safest option, but there's another type of bread that works in a completely different way, and for some kidneys that difference is decisive. Sourdough bread doesn't rely on changing the grain itself. Instead, it changes what happens before digestion even begins. And that shift from processing in your gut to processing during fermentation can quietly determine whether your kidneys feel relief or continued stress. I once spoke with a 65-year-old woman who told me something revealing. She said, "I don't have celiac disease, but regular bread always makes me feel off. Not sick, just heavy, foggy, uncomfortable." She had tried whole grain, gluten-free, even sprouted options. Some helped, some didn't. Then she switched to traditional sourdough from a local bakery. Within weeks, the bloating eased. More importantly, her blood pressure stabilized and her kidney labs stopped fluctuating. What changed wasn't the grain, it was the fermentation. Here's why that matters. True sourdough is made using natural wild yeast and lactic acid bacteria fermented slowly over many hours. During this process, bacteria partially break down gluten and complex carbohydrates before the bread is ever eaten. That means your digestive system doesn't have to work as hard to do the same job. Easier digestion leads to less gut inflammation, fewer waste byproducts, and ultimately fewer toxins entering the bloodstream, reducing the load placed on the kidneys. There's also strong science behind this. Studies on fermented foods show that sourdough fermentation lowers FODMAP content, short-chain carbohydrates that are poorly absorbed and often trigger bloating, gas, and discomfort. For people with sensitive digestion or IBS, sourdough is consistently better tolerated than conventional bread. And when digestion is smoother, kidney stress quietly decreases. Less fermentation in the gut means fewer toxic metabolites for the kidneys to filter. Now here's a critical nuance that many kidney patients never hear. When kidney function declines, minerals like phosphorus and potassium become harder to regulate. Surprisingly, white sourdough, not whole grain sourdough, can sometimes be the more kidney-friendly choice. That's because white sourdough is often lower in potassium and phosphorus while still benefiting from fermentation. This makes it a unique option for people with CKD who need mineral control without completely sacrificing digestibility. But sourdough isn't automatically safe. This is where many people get misled. Store-bought sourdough can be loaded with sodium-added yeast or even phosphate additives ingredients that completely cancel out its benefits. The safest sourdoughs have short ingredient lists: flour, water, salt, and starter. Fewer ingredients usually mean fewer hidden minerals that quietly strain the kidneys. Portion size still matters. 1 slice at a time, up to 1 or 2 slices per day, is typically enough to gain the digestive benefits without tipping mineral balance. Pairing sourdough with low-sodium foods like eggs, vegetables, or fresh spreads keeps blood pressure and fluid levels stable, both essential for kidney protection. What makes sourdough powerful is that it shifts part of digestion outside the body. It's like doing prep work before your kidneys ever have to get involved. And for many people, that shift brings subtle but meaningful relief, less bloating, steadier labs, more comfort after meals. But here's the part that catches almost everyone off guard. Even with fermentation, fiber, and mineral control, there's still one everyday bread choice that doctors long relied on for kidney patients, and that advice has recently started to change. And just knowing about sourdough still isn't enough, because there's one final factor that could quietly influence whether your kidneys stay stable or move closer to dialysis. For decades, white bread carried a strange reputation in kidney care. It was quietly labeled as safe, sometimes even recommended, while other breads were restricted. And that advice didn't come out of nowhere. For people with reduced kidney function, white bread is naturally lower in potassium and phosphorus, two minerals that weakened kidneys struggle to remove. So for many patients, especially years ago, white bread became a kind of dietary comfort zone. Familiar, predictable, non-threatening. I remember a patient in his late 60s who said, "Dr. White bread is the only thing I never gave up." He had been living with chronic kidney disease for years, carefully avoiding fruits, vegetables, and anything labeled whole. His kidney numbers were stable, but he felt tired, sluggish, and constantly constipated. What stood out wasn't that white bread was harming him, it was that it wasn't helping him anymore. And that distinction matters. Here's what we understand now that wasn't fully clear a decade ago. While white bread is lower in potassium and phosphorus, it's also stripped of most of its fiber, antioxidants, and protective plant compounds. Fiber isn't just about digestion. It plays a critical role in reducing uremic toxins, the waste products that kidneys must filter from the blood. When fiber intake is low, waste lingers longer in the gut, increasing the amount that gets reabsorbed into circulation. That means more work for the kidneys, even if mineral levels look safe on paper. Recent nutrition research has shown that gut health and kidney health are tightly connected. People with chronic kidney disease often have altered gut bacteria, leading to higher toxin production. Diets extremely low in fiber, like those relying heavily on refined white bread, can worsen this imbalance over time. So while white bread may reduce mineral stress, it can quietly increase toxin stress if it becomes the dominant staple. This is why modern kidney guidance has shifted. White bread is no longer seen as the best choice, but rather a neutral option when used intentionally. It can still play a role, especially for people who need strict potassium or phosphorus control, or for those who struggle to tolerate whole grains or fermentation. The key is how it's chosen and how it's used. Not all white bread is equal. Many commercial versions are loaded with sodium-added sugars and phosphate preservatives ingredients that quietly raise blood pressure and fluid retention, two major enemies of kidney health. The safer options are simple white breads with short ingredient lists, low sodium, and no phosphate additives. Italian-style white bread or plain sandwich bread often fits this profile better than heavily processed loaves. Portion control becomes especially important here. 1 to 2 slices per day is usually a reasonable limit. When paired with fresh foods, eggs, vegetables, lean protein, white bread can function as a neutral base rather than a nutritional dead end. But when paired with processed meats, salty spreads, or eaten mindlessly, it can quickly tip the balance in the wrong direction. What white bread teaches us is something deeper about kidney care. Safety isn't the same as support. Avoiding harm is only half the equation. Long-term kidney stability depends on reducing toxin load, supporting digestion, and maintaining habits you can sustain for years, not weeks. And this brings us to the most important realization of all. Choosing the right bread isn't about perfection. It's about understanding which trade-offs you're making every single day. But even knowing all 5 breads still isn't enough, because there's one final mistake people make that can quietly erase every benefit we've talked about so far. At this point, many people feel a sense of relief. 5 breads, clear choices, clear rules. It feels like the puzzle is finally solved. But pause for just a moment, because this is where most people make a mistake that quietly undoes everything we've just talked about. The problem isn't only which bread you choose, it's how that bread fits into the rest of your day, and this is where kidney damage often accelerates without anyone realizing it. I've seen people carefully switch to whole grain, gluten-free sprouted or sourdough bread, and still watch their kidney numbers worsen. Not because the bread was wrong, but because of timing, portions, and what was added on top. Bread doesn't act alone in the body. When it's eaten with salty meats, processed cheese, or high-sodium spreads, sodium and phosphorus spike quietly. Blood pressure rises, fluid retention increases, and the kidneys are forced to compensate over and over again long before symptoms appear. Research in kidney nutrition has shown that sodium load, not just total calories, is one of the strongest predictors of faster kidney decline. Even moderate daily excess can gradually stiffen blood vessels and reduce kidney filtration efficiency. That's why two people can eat the same healthy bread and experience completely different outcomes. One uses it as a simple base. The other unknowingly turns it into a delivery system for stress. And this is the moment I want you to think honestly about your own habits. Do you eat bread automatically without noticing what's paired with it? Have you ever thought you were eating safe only to later feel bloated, thirsty, or swollen afterward? If that sounds familiar, leave a comment. I read everyone, and you're not alone in this. Here's the deeper truth most people never hear. Kidney damage rarely comes from one bad food. It comes from small repeated decisions that feel harmless. Bread just happens to be one of the most common ones because it's so familiar, so comforting, and so easy to overlook. And this leads us to the most important part of this conversation, the part that determines whether all this knowledge actually protects your kidneys or stays theoretical. Because there's one final mindset shift that can decide whether kidney function stays stable or quietly moves toward dialysis. And that's exactly what we need to talk about next. Before we end, I want you to hear this clearly. If you're watching this video, it means you care about your kidneys, and that already puts you ahead of where many people realize the danger too late. Kidney health isn't about being perfect or following extreme rules. It's about making small, smarter choices that protect your body day after day. Choosing the right bread, paying attention to digestion, sodium, and portions. These may seem simple, but over time they truly matter. If this video helped you understand your kidneys a little better, I strongly encourage you to save it. Come back to it when you're grocery shopping, when you feel unsure, or when you need a reminder that food can either quietly help you or quietly harm you. And if you want to stay informed with the latest practical medical insights about kidney health, please subscribe to the channel. We share clear, trustworthy information designed to help you protect your kidneys and live with more confidence without fear or confusion. Most importantly, don't lose hope. Kidney decline doesn't happen overnight, and protection doesn't either. But your body responds to consistency. With the right knowledge and the right habits, many people are able to slow, damage, stabilize their numbers, and continue living full, independent lives. Take care of yourself, take care of your kidneys, and I'll see you in the next video.